Thank you. Very excited to be here today. We have a great panel presentation discussing everything and all security awareness related. So I'm going to have our panelists quickly introduce themselves, and then we'll get ready with all of our questions. So JC, why don't you go first?
Yeah, hi, JC Checco from Proofpoint. I'm the resident CISO for financial services. Prior to that, I was the leader in global security innovation for Bank of America. And prior to that, Bloomberg, so a lot of financial experience. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Joanna?
Hi, everyone. My name is Joanna Huisman. I am the SVP of Strategic Insights and Research for KnowBe4. Prior to KnowBe4, I was at Gartner. I led the industry research on security awareness and training from both a content perspective and industry. And then prior to that, I led global security awareness and training and crisis communications for ADP. Thrilled to be here.
Great. Michael?
Hi. Sort of come from a financial background. Got my start in DoD and then running Intel out of the U.S. Treasury Department. Then entered into security awareness through the UEBA track, so behavioral analytics through a company called Red Owl, and then founded a security awareness company called Atata, which was then acquired by Mimecast, and now it's part of Mimecast awareness training a couple of years later. And I run that along with threat intelligence, email, and some UX and UI services. So great to be here.
Great. And I believe we have Jay on the line as well.
Yes, I think we sorted through the technical issues finally at the last minute there. Jay Kaplan, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Synack. We are a cybersecurity firm based out of Silicon Valley, basically helping enterprises and government agencies understand where their vulnerabilities are, utilizing a crowdsourced approach to penetration testing. Effectively, we recruit, vet, and retain a global network of white hat hackers in over 85 countries and utilize them to help our customers shine light on their security issues. Prior to Synack, worked for the National Security Agency for about 5 years as a state-sponsored computer hacker.
Great. So let's start the conversation with laying a foundation here. What does it mean for an organization to have a security culture? Is there a common definition? Joanna, we'll start with you as both a researcher and a practitioner.
That's the question of the hour, actually, right? So, I think that traditionally, when we talk about anything to do with culture, it's generally an HR function. But at KnowBe4, years ago, we purchased we acquired a company called Culture out of Norway, and they've been doing significant research in this area for quite a long time, and put out a report called 7 Dimensions of Culture. Well, we've actually taken that and updated it to the Security Culture Report, where we looked at a number of industries and positions within those industries, and talked to executives and decision makers about security culture. So 94% of them said that it's very important and it's top of mind, but they can't agree on what it actually is. And so if you look at kind of what they've told us, the executives actually shared 758 different definitions for security culture. So it's one of those things that, I think a lot of people have an opinion on, but we haven't actually, hammered down an actual definition. But here at KnowBe4, we look at security culture as an objective scientific method for assessing and reporting and comparing the relative cybersecurity culture and related strengths within an organization, within individuals, and regions across, a bunch of different dimensions. And so when you really start peeling it back, it's, how the individuals are, taking responsibility for protecting themselves and their personal space on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think that was a great overview. Any other panelists want to chime in with their thoughts on defining security culture and how that's worked in their organization?
Sure. Hey, John Checco here from Proofpoint. I look at security culture with 3 E's: empathy, empowerment, and effectiveness. And what does empathy mean, right? Empathy means that the people, right, the boots on the ground have to understand the primary and secondary impacts from anything they do. The empowerment means they have the authority and they can take ownership for that security accountability. And the effectiveness is to understand that the earlier they catch security issues, the cheaper it'll be to fix it and the quicker they can fix it. So the 3 E's.
I can chime in. So obviously have a little bit of a different perspective, not being a CISO, but running a security firm. And I think for me, in talking to our customers, the biggest culture obviously is a little bit of a loaded word, hard to define. But I think from a security perspective, what we try to really help our customers understand is the more that they can get their employees thinking like the adversary that's ultimately attacking them, the better they are going to be at protecting themselves. And so, always having in the back of your mind, is this action that I'm about to take, is this email I'm opening, is this network that I'm connecting to, does it feel secure, or is this something that might be putting information at risk? I think having that mentality truly helps shape a culture around security very differently than kind of being more proactive and kind of just listening to policy. It's not a clear definition necessarily, but I think it's just this mentality shift that has to be instilled in every single employee at the organization.
Yeah, I mean, I think to follow on that, I think that's exactly right. And a way to do that is through a Hearts and Minds campaign, right? This is really how to occupy more mind share of the employee and how to change their view of security from one of compliance, where it's something they have to do, to commitment, where they feel committed to security, and not only for their company, but for themselves and their family, and they understand the interconnection and connectivity between all those elements.
Yeah, we just had a live question come in. I think historically the first step in building that culture of security, and maybe an organization's only step, is to have an annual security awareness training. So, do you incorporate that? Are there other things besides training that really help build this culture that is so important for an organization?
I mean, I can take a stab. I think, unfortunately, doing annual training isn't going to work. Coming from the Army, we have annual training on lots of things, and it just doesn't. It's like not sticky. It's awful, and people do everything they can to avoid taking it or figure out ways to hack through it. Really, what preponderance of evidence shows is that having sort of micro learning, breaking up that training throughout the year into little bits. I think really what's important at the end of the day is meeting people where they are, right? How do people best absorb information? How do you best transform the way someone thinks about it? And once a year, I think it was Jay alluded to sort of sitting, or someone alluded to sitting in front of a PowerPoint or sort of lecture for a year. Like that is, shocker, that actually doesn't work. So it really needs to meeting people where they are in micro bits.
And I'd like to dovetail on Michael, your earlier comment about hearts and minds. And one of the things I find effective, and I'll just digress a little bit. I'm actually a fire instructor, so I teach firefighters. And one of the things we do, and we apply this for cybersecurity too, we make it personal first, right? So give them the tools that they can help secure their home networks or their own devices, make them want to, and then kind of dovetail that into the business side of security. So I think the hearts and minds approach really works well.
And I totally agree with both what JC and Michael said. The whole notion of doing anything on a point in time basis in security, it just doesn't make sense anymore. I mean, we're way too dynamic. Our infrastructure is changing, applications are being updated, people are moving around. It has to be thought of as a more continuous dynamic, and to the extent that training can be continuous, I think that's a great thing. But a little bit harder to do. In the same world where we are focusing customers on penetration testing, which historically has been a point-in-time event, we're moving them away from that point-in-time paradigm to something that is much more continuous, and helping them understand where are those vulnerabilities constantly, because the adversary is not looking at them once a year. The adversary is looking at them all the time and finding that one way in the front door.
Yeah, all good points there. So I'm going to pivot a little bit. Obviously, this wouldn't be a panel in the time of the pandemic if we didn't talk about the drastic change and the shift to work from home. So with so many employees teleworking at an unprecedented scale and the speed at which organizations had to transition to mass telework, how have security awareness programs had to adapt? Jay, I'll have you kick it off if you don't mind. I think you're uniquely positioned being the CEO for Synack. Uh-oh, we might have lost him. I think we lost him.
I can't unmute.
Oh, you're right.
Does someone else want to pick that up?
Oh, we just heard you, Jay. You're good.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, now we can.
It says I'm still muted, so sorry about that. I guess it's lagging a little bit. So, I think from my perspective, what's really changed, and as everyone has probably heard this over and over again, but so much more is being exposed outside of the firewall than ever before. People are working from home. They have to access parts of the network and applications that historically were only accessible in the confines of the office or within a VPN. And it's analogous to basically building a side door inside of your bank's vault. There is now this other connectivity into very sensitive information. And so what we're seeing now is customers recognizing that areas of the network and applications that haven't historically been tested as thoroughly as things inside their DMV or on the external side of the network, they need to start taking that stuff seriously. I think if you couple that with the fact that employees are now connecting to home networks with an abundance of IoT devices, with family members who are also on that network, they now have to start to extend the attack surface from just their desktop machine to everyone else that's within their house. Not so dissimilar to sitting in an internet cafe and having to worry about other people sitting on that unprotected network. Now, obviously, lots of technology can help with this. I think some organizations do it better than others. But what we're seeing right now is just a huge increase in activity to rapidly assess what is now being exposed outside that has never touched the outside before.
Yeah, Joanna, do you want to chime in with what you're seeing?
Sure. Colleen, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I had some technical problems, so I'm sorry. Yeah, absolutely. So I think, even just based on kind of the research that I did at Gartner, as well as my collective research here at KnowBe4, what we're finding in today's environment is that, the attackers are, just as kind of crafty and creative and mischievous as they've always been, right? And so we saw a significant increase in the March-April timeframe for kind of COVID-related phishing attacks and so forth. And so the increase was around 6,000%. And so these criminals are taking advantage of everything and anything, that has to do with either pop culture or something that's in the media or very relevant or newsworthy. And so, our employees and their families need to be kind of very aware and kind of very on their toes. And I think, the biggest problem here that we have, especially in the work from home environment, is the distractions, right? And so, there's a sense of isolation within a workplace, whether it's an office or a cubicle. And here, I battle my husband on a daily basis for the office. He won today. And, I have children running in and out of the house, and I have visitors, and I have FedEx, and so this distraction causes a heightened sense of, I just call it being, I think, a little bit more vulnerable to things that we may not have been in the past.
Yeah, I'd like to dovetail again. Joanna and Jay had really good points. To take the FinServ spin on that, you just complicate those things by, the things we have to do from a regulatory basis. So you think about traders, buy side and sell side, are both working from home. When they were working in the office, there was actually physical information walls and logical information walls that prevented them from, doing a collusion. So now, how do you guarantee that from a virtual standpoint? And then there's call center surveillance monitoring for any bank that has any type of customer access. And then, how do you ensure that your compliance reporting is correct, right? So I know these are all business things, but from a user standpoint, right, these users have to have to know this while they're working at home and make sure they take the appropriate steps and, don't leave themselves locked while they go handle the FedEx or the children or whatever. So I think that's, there's an extra level in terms of having to be due diligence with your own private security.
Yeah, I think sort of two separate threads on that. One is, it's been a field day for hackers, because what do hackers really rely on? They rely on people being distracted and stressed out and hungry for information. Well, enter COVID, they're completely distracted, they're totally stressed out, and people are more desirous of information than ever before. So it's just been a wonderful field day for them. We've seen on our network attacks skyrocketing. We've actually seen the importance of awareness training, like significantly minimizing, clicks on URLs. So it does work. But the amount and the rate of attacks have just skyrocketed and continue to be pretty high. JC introduced an interesting point on the compliance part. I have friends who are in that kind of compliancy space because of Treasury. And I just heard of this horrific situation where this engineering company, tons of IP, had an employee click on a ridiculous link, and they had a ransomware attack for $3 million. They were going to pay it. They worked with their attorneys. Everything was above board. The last minute, the attorneys came back and said, sorry, this hacker is associated with a firm on an entity on the SDN list, so you can't pay them. So now this company is in this horrific situation where they're stuck in nowhere land, where they can't pay the ransomware, and their IP is all held up. So, and all because of an employee, doing something completely sloppy. So it's scary, I think all the more reason why I think all of us on the call probably attest to the fact that awareness training has become increasingly important.
Yeah, and I would definitely add, it's not like the attackers have gotten more sophisticated, right? If anything, the attacks are just as easy or simple as they were, a year ago. You do your package delivery notification. That's been around for how many years? But you know what? When we've been ordering every single thing online, we're not going to think twice about a package notification.
You're so spot on. They're actually going downstream, right? So these sophisticated hackers, they're not, they are on some levels getting more sophisticated, but actually the greater damage is that what we see is them moving downstream to more vulnerable businesses and obviously employees. So we're seeing that too. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
2020 is the year of 7 plagues, right? And it's tough for us, but it's easy for the hackers because they just switch their lures on a dime. So.
Right.
Yeah. So, we've obviously given some anecdotes, but, as we've made the shift to working from home, overall, do you think security behaviors have improved, declined, or stayed steady? And I'll open it up to anyone who wants to chime in.
Can you hear me, Colleen?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, I think it's a little too early to tell, right? And so what we're seeing, though, is that more companies are, looking for help in this area, right? And so they're looking for services to help them with kind of a more continuous model, right? And so what the panel's been talking about up to this point, right, something that's less event-based on an annual or biannual or just Security Awareness Month, right? And something that is more, more continuous with, training and communication and, anti-phishing attacks and all of that kind of stuff. But I think, I think we're a little too early unless my fellow panelists have seen something different.
I think you're right. It's too early. The one change I have seen is the amount of corporate communications reiterating securing work from home, and unfortunately, sometimes those emails from corporate communications look like fish emails themselves. So that's a different story together. But I see a more frequency of the corporate communications going out and reminding people. And I think people may, and again, too early to tell, but people may be heeding it because they are paranoid about COVID and they are paranoid about some of these other things that are going on. So who knows?
Yeah, but I think also, I mean, here we've been talking about this as the new normal. A lot of this work from home, may be permanent for a lot of people, right? And so I think that we've seen, some major corporations say, we're not going back until late next year. And I think that, we're going to see, a traditional workplace really morph into something that is a little bit more dynamic, and we're going to see, that people are going to have a tendency to be able to work from home. And, my kids are freaked out because, like, this online, school means that there's no more snow days, right? And so I think it's going to impact a lot of us in different ways.
So I think a couple of things. One is I wouldn't worry about it because it's not going to snow anymore anyway. So I think we're good. I think we're good there. And what we have seen, and this was pre-COVID as well, and that is training is better than no training, right? That if you have security awareness training, your employees click on fewer bad URLs than if you don't have it, right? So I think as a community, we can say we're effective. I think the impact of how we're going to have to rethink and evolve as an industry with the change of the office, I think is a really good point. It's something I think we're all working on every day to kind of think about how to, again, this challenge and opportunity to meet people where they are, and how they're changing the way that they think about work and think about security generally. And I also think institutions like financial institutions actually help, right? I mean, they're promoting security in a separate way. So I think as sort of the ecosystem begins to promote the importance of security, it will help augment and educate people outside of just kind of corporate education.
Yeah, Michael, I absolutely agree with you, right? And so I think that, we are necessary, and I think our industry is stepping up to provide, our clients with, what they need to be more secure. And we did some research. We do it on an annual basis at KnowBe4. It's the phishing benchmark report. And we looked at about 17,000 organizations, about 4 million users with almost about 10 million or so phishing tests. And what we found, we have it by industry, it's on our website, but what we found is that, and if we just look at a baseline across all of those users without any kind of intervention from, new school security awareness training or phishing or communications, the susceptibility rate, the vulnerability rate is about, 38 or so %. Once you put in, a continuous program at that 3-month mark, 90-day mark, it goes down to about 14%. When you look at it at about a year, you're down to a vulnerability of about 5%, right? And so we see, based on applying the right kind of awareness training, how your company can go from being, crazy vulnerable to something that is, more manageable.
Yeah, we actually tied to that. We have a live question that just came in. This person listening in works in a very large organization, commenting over 60,000 people. So the idea of continuous training with a small staff seems a little bit daunting. So what are kind of some key recommendations anyone on the panel has to, what are really good tools or techniques or programs that could be more easily rolled out to a large organization and still be effective?
Yeah, I mean, I think automation is the key, right? There's no way around that. If you have 60,000 people and if you have a very small staff, you're overwhelmed with, the crisis of the minute. So I think automation and some sort of program that's set it and forget it is critical. Otherwise you can't, there's no other way around it. Like automation, some sort of set it and forget it that does hit some kind of continuous training is, to me, the overall, brush. That's, I think, one, the first step are those sort of three components.
Yeah, Michael, I couldn't agree more, right? And so I actually ran security awareness and training for an organization that had 55,000 people in 132 countries that spoke 20 different languages. And I think automation certainly is the key there. And having consistent communications and communications that go out through multiple channels and then back, like, you have to kind of, get on the back of other communications being sent out of other departments and so forth. But one of the things that I found at Gartner, which was always very interesting to me, and I did some research on it and published a paper there that's still available, is this concept of security champions or advocates. Right. And so what companies are doing is, since they don't have the reach within their organization, and listen, I had a team of 5 when I ran that program, is what they're doing is they're, enrolling people that aren't necessarily the security experts, but, somebody who has influence in a local office or department. And they're putting these people in positions of power where they actually reinforce the training and or the messages. And let's say it's in, your champion is in France. Well, they can actually give a cultural perspective and a cultural delivery that you can't from, let's say, the United States where I was. And so, these programs, though, some of them are very simple and some of them are very sophisticated, where they have goals for these people and they have, kind of rewards, and it's in their performance plans, and, they become very coveted positions, and they're cycled through every 2 years with new participants, right? So there's a lot of different ways you can look at this, but as far as extending your reach, that's a great way. And I think the other thing that I learned in my research at Gartner was that many companies are starting to put in this kind of, reward consequence program, right? And so, and that's a little controversial, right? Because a lot of companies like to do the reward, but fall short on the consequences. So it's, what can we do on each side to give a balanced approach there to make kind of that 20% of the population that might not be paying attention or taking it seriously, kind of really step up their actions.
Yeah, Checco again, and I agree, Joanna. Those are really 2 good points. The problem with the consequence model is that if it affects their ability to do operations, right, that always gets escalated and then they take it away. But I really want to touch on that point you said about champions, because at Bloomberg I actually instantiated the BISO program there, and the whole idea of the BISO program is that we had this saying that's easier to teach a business person security than to teach a security person all the nuances of business. And so if you create a champion in the line of business that's a security person, give them the security training they need, and let them disseminate the security issues that are relevant to the business, that goes a lot farther than just, again, the annual training or the blanket statement. And the great example I love to use here is that the security awareness training about opening emails and don't open PDFs, don't open unsolicited emails. But if you're a recruiter in a company, that's exactly your job. So you have to be able to train particular to them, and you can't create customized training for everyone. So it's your champions that are able to do this for you. And again, it's more effective and it's more efficient, I believe. So good point, Joanna.
The only thing I would add to everything that you guys said, and I agree with everything, is that it's not the core competency of these organizations to be doing this training, especially at this level of scale. And when we talk about automation, companies need to really embrace the concept of leveraging outside help. There are full companies and vendors built around security awareness training, vulnerability assessments, et cetera. And I can't tell you how many companies try to hire in-house to just do this all themselves, and it always fails. And so, yes, it will cost maybe more money, but I think in the end, it probably will end up being way more cost efficient to embrace the security vendor community that's out there that is spending every single day on this problem. Joanna, I think you're muted.
Can you hear me? You can hear me now?
No,
okay, yeah, I laughed when you said that because at Gartner, clients would tell us that they had a tendency of selecting people to run their security awareness departments that were A, drew the shortest straw, or B, had time to work on this stuff, right? And what if, what a beginning of a failure it was. And so, I know that myself and my final panelists that are at providers, my fellow panelists that are at providers know that, it's you're best positioned if you work with a provider that has, a really good continuous automated program.
Not biased, right, Joanna?
Pardon me?
You're not biased at all.
No, I said my fellow panelists. I'm being pretty fair.
Of course, of course. No, I mean, you guys are obviously very well positioned to help with this.
So I think we have time for one more prepared question, and then, thank you to everyone who's been using the Q&A function. Feel free to put one or two more questions in there. So we've definitely talked, about strategic. We've gotten into a little bit of tactical, talking about champions or BISOs. So are there any tools or resources you found effective in creating a security culture at your organization, or certain messaging that's resonated with others? We've definitely seen hashtags out there, stay cyber safe, be cyber smart. Anything that's really resonated with you that you'd like to share before we open it up for any other questions? And JC, I'll turn to you, not to put you on the spot, but maybe you have something.
At prior employers, we always, because we're in New York City, we always had the idea of, if you see something, say something. And that was basically, I talked this early on about the level of empowerment, giving people the ability to do something about security. So that's their first level of, I'd say, training, because if you're giving them empowerment, then they have to understand how and when to use that empowerment. So the other thing I thought that was really interesting is at another employer, we used gamification, and we used challenge level, capture the flag, things that would keep them coming back month after month to maybe small segments, like Michael had said and Jay had said, the continuous education. So I think that's important, right? To keep them wanting to come back and do that.
Just add, I think nothing is more effective than showing examples of where security has failed. When people see an example email or phishing email that was opened, and then the consequences of that, like it gets talked about, it really drives home what the threat is. And, and you can do it without shaming people. I think it's really important for people to understand the consequences of their actions, and how, just clicking one link can lead to the total compromise of an entire network.
I think, in this, linking this back to COVID, I think there's so much, and also just our general political environment at this moment. And I think this is true, like we're global. I see this across, it's just pretty tense. That to get through that kind of layer of I don't even know what it is, like stress bucket craziness, is humor. Right. So I think that using humor as a way into changing those hearts and minds is that's what we've seen as our go-to.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add to that, right? And so I think, it's up to the organization to have employees be able to perceive and understand, what their role is in the organization, whether it is a critical factor in sustaining a secure environment or endangering the security of the whole organization, right? And so I think, I agree with what my fellow panelists have said, and I think it's some of the simple things, right? So it's getting them engaged. So it could be just, a phishing button, like when they suspect that they're receiving, a compromised email, that they can, press a button and then that email gets, sent to the tech team or the security team to be able to look at it and investigate whether or not it is something suspicious. And, when employees do that and they get something back saying, thank you and we'll look at this, or, it kind of makes them feel like they're participating. But I also think that, as much as you can continue to talk about this and make this a topic, so many companies have a tendency to shy away from it because they're afraid that if they talk about cybersecurity and the expectations of, their employees, that all of a sudden there's going to be a slip, or people are going to be afraid, or people are going to, back off. And that's just not true. I mean, the more you talk about it, the more commonplace it becomes and the more participative your employees will be in it.
Absolutely. I did a debrief for one of our internal teams recently, and they were like, you send these phishing tests. She's like, is it okay if I talk about it, or am I cheating? I was like, that's exactly what we want you to do. Like, I want you to have that dialogue. When we used to be, and I'd send them, I'd literally see a ripple throughout the office, right? Like, did you just get that? Did you get that? And, that's exactly what we want. We're not going to count it as cheating.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, I mean, it certainly screws with your results if you're just looking at click rates, but that's great behavior, right? You want people to be able to warn each other about, something that might be suspect. And I think that, that whole kind of having these natural conversations and open conversations is really healthy and important.
No, I agree. It really comes back down to the people aspect of things. Like you said, you can have all the metrics in the world, but if people aren't talking to each other about the good and the bad, then, you're kind of at a loss. And, with this whole work from home, you want people to, it's more of an effort for people to start communicating with each other. So it becomes a challenge.
Yep. All right. Well, we have 2 minutes left. I don't think we have time to do a full question. I'm just going to reiterate, the theme for this year's Cybersecurity Awareness Month is Do Your Part, Be Cyber Smart. So I really want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today. This was a great conversation. And thank you everyone who attended.